Okay, boys and girls, you've already been introduced to two characters in the story, which is a good way to always start a story, is to introduce the characters. And we know about Nick, and we also know about Mrs. Granger. She might be a teacher at Thornwell Elementary. You think? I don't know. She looks kind of interesting. So chapter 3 is about the question. The first day of school was always about getting acquainted day. Books were passed out and there was a lot of chatter. Everyone asked, "What did you do over the summer?" Periods 1 through 6 went by very smoothly for Nick. But then came period 7. Mrs. Granger's class was all business. The first thing they did was take a vocabulary test to see how many of the 35 words for the week the kids already knew. Tremble, circular, orchestra, the list went on and on. Nick knew most of them. Then there was a handout about class procedures. After that, there was a review of paper about cursive writing, and then there was the sample sheet showing how the headings should look on every assignment. No let up for 37 minutes straight. Nick was an expert at asking the delaying question, also known as the teacher stopper or the guaranteed time waster. At 3 minutes before the bell, at that split second between the end of today's class and the work that was announced for tomorrow's homework, Nick could launch a question guaranteed to sidetrack the teacher long enough to delay or even wipe out the homework assignment. Timing was important, but asking the right question, that was the hard part. Questions about stuff in the news, questions about the college the teacher went to, questions about the teacher's favorite book or sports or hobby. Nick knew all the tricks, and he had been very successful in the past. Here he was in the 5th grade, near the end of his very first language arts class with Mrs. Granger, and Nick could feel a homework assignment coming the way a farmer can feel about a rainstorm. Mrs. Granger paused to catch her breath, and Nick's hand shot up. He glanced down at her seating chart. She glanced down at her seating chart and then up at him. Her sharp gray eyes were not even turned up to half the power. "Yes, Nicholas?" "Mrs. Granger, you have so many dictionaries in this room, and that huge one especially. Where did all those words come from? Did they just get copied from other dictionaries? It sure is a big book." It was a perfect thought grenade. Kapow! Several students smiled, and a few peeked at the clock. Nick was famous for this, and the whole class knew what he was doing. Unfortunately, so did Mrs. Granger. She hesitated a moment and gave Nick a smile that was just a little too sweet to be real. Her eyes were the color of a thundercloud. "Why, what an interesting question, Nicholas. I could talk about that for hours, I bet." She glanced around the classroom. "Do the rest of you want to know, too?" Everyone nodded yes. "Well, very well then, Nicholas. Will you do some research on that subject and give a little oral report to the class? You can find out the answers yourself. It will mean so much more than if I just told you. Please have your report ready for our next class." Mrs. Granger smiled at him again, very sweetly. Then it was back to business. "Now the homework for tomorrow can be found on page 12 of your Words Alive book." Nick barely heard the assignment. His heart was pounding, and he felt small, very small. He could feel the tops of his ears glowing red. A complete shutdown, an extra assignment, and probably a little black mark next to his name on the seating chart. Everything he had heard about this teacher was true. Don't mess around with the Granger. The next chapter you were going to read is called Word Detective. But I want to mention one thing about this book that I love. Did you guys notice when I was reading this page over here, I made a mistake? And the mistake that I made, I said, I think a she instead of a he. And when I read a few words more, that didn't make sense. So I had to go back and correct it, because when you're reading, if it doesn't make sense, you got to stop and go back. And good readers make mistakes all the time. It's just that they go back and double check and say, oh, that wasn't right. Go back, read it again. So the question, I don't think he should have asked that question to the Granger.